Okay, we're going to continue with the mixer from last week, and we're going to try to get this put back together. So I went on to Amazon. Remember that gear we went over that was bad? This was the gear here that was bad. So we ordered a replacement for it. It was, I believe, right around $7, six something and some tax. So we're going to try to replace that, put that on today, and see how this goes and see if that fixes our problem. So first thing we've got to do is get our parts out, and that, if you can remember, that part that we're going to replace is on here. So there was a little drift pin, and I'll kind of give you a close-up on how it comes out. If you look right here, that little pin where my finger's pointing right here, there's a little pin there that needs to be pulled out, and then that gear shaft will fall out. This will fall out the bottom. We can replace it. We want to make sure that the orientation is correct though. So these gears are going from right to left upward. So we want to make sure we put that gear in there the same way it came out, or it's not going to mesh with the worm gear that it has to drive. So the first thing we're going to do here, we're going to take this here. We're going to pull that pin with a pair of needle nose. Don't want to lose that. If not, you're going to be ordering one of those. Then we're going to push this shaft out the bottom. So when we do that, I think we went over last week that there's possibly some washers and some things like that in there. You want to take a look and see where they come from so that this goes back in the same orientation. So I'm going to pull this gear out, and there are two washers, but they are stuck in there, so I'm not going to move them. This is garbage. We're going to replace it with the new gear. We may have to remove these. Just for now, we have to put them back. They're nylon washers that we have to use, or else it's not going to go together properly. So we're going to put one here. We're going to slide this one in on the bottom here. I'm going to take a flathead and we'll help work that in a little bit because that washer wants to push out. Now we're going to push our gear back up through. That one washer's a little bit out of there. We go. We'll push that gear back up through. Now what we need to do is, if you have to make sure that we line that hole right there, we have to line that hole up with the hole in the shaft. So you got to just turn that until you see that you're lined up. There it is there. And I can push my pin in. Goes. Something's holding it up a little bit. I want to see what's going on in there. There we go. I'm going to tap that in. Lining up quite right. It'll go. So I'm going to take a little dead blow or a little rawhide and just tap that in. There it goes. Good. I can get this thing lined up so I can tap it in a little easier. I'm going to grab a different punch. I think this one's a little bit small for what I'm trying to do. Let me grab a different punch. Grab one with a little bit bigger head so I can get it on there once it slides off. There we go. There it is. So you want to make sure you bury that pin all the way in. You can see it's hanging out a little bit on this side. And also on this side, so it doesn't go flush with it. Now what we want to do is replace it on the machine. So we're going to get the machine out. There we go. That's the head of it. That goes there. And we got this guy here. So what we're going to do now is we have to replace and put this back in. So remember, we had this gasket here we didn't want to damage. So we want to make sure that that's in place. I think it's actually upside down. So we're going to put that on the way it goes. There we go. And then this will get bolted on the same way it came off. We're going to take the screws out of this. I put everything in this jar here, so we're going to take the parts out of there that we're going to need. And we know that those ones had grease all over them, so because it was inside the head, and there's 3 screw holes and 3 screws that need to go in there. So we're going to tighten those in. We have one here. There we go. And don't ever tighten all your bolts at once. Just get them all started so that you can line your holes up. If you try to get them all lined up and tighten one, you may not get the other one lined up correctly, and then you end up forcing the screw in and it cross threads and it strips it out. So we're going to go like that there. Then we can, now that we have them in, we can snug these up. Remember, force is no need for this. You want to snug them, not tighten them so tight that you break the screw off in there. If you do, the machine probably will be garbage unless you can get an easy out or something, a screw extractor, to remove it. So there we go. So there we go. That gear works. As you can see, as I turn this yellow gear, that turns this shaft, and that will essentially turn the head down there. So I'm going to wipe my hands off with a paper towel and then put some gloves on and load this thing full of grease. So let me get a paper towel. I'm going to put some gloves on and load the head of this full of grease. Got a little bit on my sweatshirt, so we'll get that off of there. There we go. Alright, I'm going to put some gloves on. We're going to put some, same way we took the grease out, just by taking and grabbing our finger and pulling it out of there, we're going to put the grease back in. And then we'll reassemble the rest of the machine. And then we'll determine whether or not what we did actually fixed the machine, which I'm assuming it will. That's why, if you remember, what was going on is it was making a grinding sound, and you know, wasn't allowing the machine to turn. So let's go ahead and get some grease in there. So we're going to just take it like this here, and if you can remember from the first video, there was a lot of grease. So we're going to put a lot back in. The whole thing was filled with grease. So we're going to go like this and just kind of load that in there. If you remember, it was all over everything in there. And that just keeps all those gears lubricated when they're spinning around, mixing up the cake batter and the, you know, anything else you got. If it dries out, it's not going to be any good. There we go. Once you do that, we're going to wipe our hands off. Take a little bit more of this. Let me get a stick. Put a little bit more in there. A little more isn't going to hurt anything. There we go. Now, I'm going to wipe my hand off, keep these gloves on if I can so I can still work with them because I'm still going to get more grease on myself. That glove split, so I'm going to get a different one. There we go. And then we'll reassemble the top. Slide that back down on top, put our screws in the way they go, and reassemble the rest of the machine. So this is going to go like this. This goes here. This gets slid down on top. There's a shaft that needs to be lined up. May need to turn this shaft. There it goes. All right, so now we're going to take our paper towel. Just get rid of this extra grease that's coming out so we can keep our hands and everything else out of it. There we go. While we're working to fix the rest of it. Now, if you can remember, there's a lot of bolts that go in there. So these bolts all go on the bottom. Remember, they held They held what we originally thought was this gear, but these are flatheads, so take those and get those all lined up. I believe there were 5 of them from the first video, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe there were 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. So we'll get all 5 of those same bolts together. Put those in, that'll hold it down. And we'll tighten those up. Then there's a couple, if you can remember, a couple of them go up through here.